Welcome to Women of Steel with me, Miriam Grace, the podcast where women who've had their mettle tested help us make important links for ourselves. I talk to remarkable women about their lives and challenges through the lens of my own work as a psychotherapist. We uncover stories which challenge the power of the status quo and validate the voices of marginalised or disadvantaged women. How can we create a life for ourselves? How can we thrive? These were probably not questions that women gave much thought to in the 1950s when Caron Kirkham was born. Caron is a freelance mental health first aid instructor and also an associate trainer for the MHFA England and British Safety Council. She also spends her time as Director of Compassionate Voices, founder of Wishing Well Shining Bright, lead campaigner for the Green Party, podcasting with other MHFA instructors, and is the co-facilitator of an in-person Action for Happiness group. Our episode today contains that special Women of Steel concept of telling our stories. We discuss the importance of listening, young people, climate activism, and cycling in Caron's life, as well as the importance of creativity, community, and passion in staying young. So, welcome, Caron. I'm so pleased to have got you onto Women of Steel to talk about your life and your work. Let us know, what is your work and where are you from and all of that.
Okay, thanks, Miriam. Thanks for asking me. I'm really happy to be here. So I'm Caron Kirkham, and I currently live in Newcastle upon Tyne, or just out of Newcastle. And I'm originally from Derby. And I currently spend my time, I earn my living as a mental health first aid instructor, mainly delivering youth courses, which is something I've been passionate about and been involved in for the last 30 odd years. And so that's my sort of paid work. But then there are lots of other things that I do that I'm really excited about at the moment. So last year I signed up to be the lead campaigner for the Green Party in the place where I live. So I'm just sort of feeling my way into that. I'm very new to politics. It's probably been about a couple of years since I got involved. But I'm really experienced at community development. So that's what I'm really interested in, and getting people together and finding out what we can do in terms of resilience and taking action and looking after our community and our, the people in that community. So I'm really sort of fired up about that. I do all sorts of voluntary work as well. I've always done voluntary work since I was about 20. So I run an Action for Happiness group with a small team of other volunteers. That's really lovely. I used to be a jeweler. I worked as a jeweler from, I think, when I was about 20 again. And I used to make jewellery and repair jewellery. And I did that for probably about 20 years before I moved into the voluntary sector and working in the voluntary sector. But I take part in a repair cafe doing jewellery repairs, which is really nice. It's lovely to get back to it.
So that's similar to the program that we love to watch on telly, The Repair Shop.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it seems like, quite an innocent, maybe even boring program, and then we end up in tears because
the stories.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's the stories that really connect us to the details of people's lives, and we can do that through objects and memories as well. And you said that you began quite a lot of charity work when you were 20, but how old are you now, Caron?
I'm 68.
I know that is
68.
mad. That is mad.
It is.
Yeah, because you know, when we were growing up, you know, there were very few 68-year-olds who would be Green Party activists, you know, working with youth, with young people, and having this sort of real passion for the earth, sustainability, and so on. And there wouldn't be that many that had signed up for one of your one of the projects you've just signed up for this year,
Yeah,
Caron.
yeah. So about the same time as I got proposed to be a candidate, a campaigner um, for the Green Party, I signed up to do a big bike ride. So I'm going to in November. I'm going to go to Vietnam, and I am going to with lots of other people. I'm going to cycle to Cambodia, and I've forgotten how many miles it is, but I just know that we'll be cycling day after day, and it is something that I've done before, but it was 18 years ago. So yeah, I'm not maybe I'm more confident than I was then because I know I can do it. But
Yeah.
also I'm 18 years older now and a bit creaky. Um, but I'm excited about it. Yeah. Mm.
So, so there's something about, you know, age not defining you.
No.
But we were talking about this episode before we pressed record, and I think that we were really connecting with the importance of life and life experience, and those early things that you went through in your life, and how you've got to here. And you were saying that you finally feel as if you know what you're here for.
Mm.
Tell us a bit about that feeling, or that, you know,
Oh,
that moment.
yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I feel like I've been lost quite a lot until quite recently. Just not knowing what my life purpose was, or if I'd already achieved my life purpose. And now I feel like, particularly with sort of, the eco warrior bit, or the Jerry activist, as a lot of us are called nowadays, that feels something that I'm really passionate about, and that feels really important. And I think it ties in with the young people as well, because a lot of young people are really anxious about the climate and about the future, and just anxious generally. And I can certainly relate to that from my own childhood, although their experience is very different to mine because it's a completely different world that they live in to the one I
Well,
lived in.
I mean, it is, but we did grow up, didn't we, with the nuclear threat and the
Yes,
Cuba,
that's one of
yeah.
yeah, it's one of my earliest memories. My mum talking about nuclear bombs
Yeah.
when I was quite young. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, I think the Cuban Missile Crisis perhaps happened. Maybe it was just
68.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
yeah, it was in the 60s, wasn't it? It was
Mm,
and I look back and I think, you know, we didn't know, but I'm assuming that the adults that were surrounding us were experiencing some of what we're experiencing
yeah,
today,
yeah,
which is this, you know, concern about what will happen next, what next,
yeah.
and there's something about you wanting to give some of these young people something that you didn't have because the adults weren't talking to us, but
Mm,
we did know what was going on.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I was certainly, you know, preparing, you know, for, you know, the 3 minute warning, and what, you
Mm,
know, I knew what I was going to try and attempt to do in those
yeah.
3 minutes when I was
Wow.
growing up. And it's,
Yeah.
you know, so having that increased communication, do you think that is something that is different with this generation, that they can talk to adults, or do you think that's still a barrier?
Um, it's not so much that can they talk to adults, it's with will the adults listen? One of the key things really about supporting people with their mental health. It's about listening to them without judgment and hearing what's actually going on for them. And that's really hard to do. I trained as a counsellor, and I feel like I'm still working on really listening to people and listening to what their experience is. I think it's really important. And I've noticed with a lot of the climate resilience work that's going on at the moment, it's all about listening to people and listening to what they feel about the current situation. But I think what's different about young people in this particular time after COVID is the fact that when we went through COVID, we had some resilience because we'd been through life. And I was scared, when we first got locked down, and I wasn't sure. I felt like I was vulnerable because I was older, because that's what we were told. And but I'd got that resilience, whereas I think a lot of young people haven't developed that yet, and I think that could be the reason why we're seeing such a lot of anxiety at the moment. And I do think that there are more places for people to go and have those supportive conversations, but it's finding the right place to go because there's so much information out there.
Yeah, yeah. I think that your point about COVID is so pertinent. And, recently we've had the government saying about the increase of diagnoses of mental health problems and so on. And, I sort of, I'm sitting there, shouting at the television, well, what did you expect?
Yeah.
We've had a global pandemic, people aren't making this stuff up. The fallout is beginning to hit. And what was so puzzling to me after the end of the pandemic and the arrival of vaccines and, some increased return to work and life was that people very quickly forgot that we had been in fear of contracting something that might kill us or our loved ones, and that we'd been, walking on the opposite side of the road. We'd been washing our hands when we brought in the online shopping delivery. We'd been, just trying not to breathe, which is going to induce increased anxiety symptoms. And those children, when I was saying, in my mind as a teenager, for example, was preparing for the nuclear bomb to drop, in a sense, the bomb did drop for them. They did live through this particular bomb dropping.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, let's go back to the beginning and have a look at some of the things that you feel formed your life and formed who you are. And you spoke quite a bit about being lost just now, and this feeling of being lost, and I think that drives some of your passion for working with young people. Where do you think that feeling of being lost began?
Okay, well, I was born in 1957, in January, the end of January, and in 1960, so it was just before I was 3. My dad died unexpectedly. My mum was pregnant with my brother, so she was 7 months pregnant. I don't remember it at all. And then 2 years later, my dad's dad died when I was 5. And I do remember that. I do remember him. And I remember my mum telling me that he died. But apart from knowing that he died, it was never talked about. And if you can imagine, there's a whole family of bereaved women. So there was my mum, my grandma, my auntie, all these women who'd lost family members, but never talked about it. And it didn't feel okay to talk about it. And I think as a consequence of that, I mean, there were lots of other things going on as well, but I think as a consequence of those 2 events, I became a really anxious child. And again, looking back with knowledge, I I think, probably depressed by the time I was 14.
Mm.
But there was nowhere to go with it. I didn't know who to talk to. There was nobody in my family I could talk to. So I hid it. I hid it really well. I perfected the art of being completely invisible. So, I was a bit bad, but I was never too bad so that I'd be noticed. And I was a bit good, but I'd never be too good. So I didn't get noticed. And I think that's where the feeling lost thing comes from, because I didn't feel like I was me and I didn't know who me was. And, that went on until I had my second daughter when I was 30. And I've been in touch with a school friend. So my friend Christine, she was only at my school for, I think, 2 years, and then she moved away. But we kept in touch. We used to write to each other in the old days. And we're still in touch now, but we Zoom now. But yeah, we used to write to each other, and she was my confidante, if you like, and we shared things that had happened to us. And eventually, she encouraged me to go and get some help. And what she said was, just go and talk to somebody. Don't worry how they respond. Just listen to yourself. And so I reached out. I went to my GP first, and again, back in the day, my GP said, I've just had this letter through from the Women's Centre in Derby, which is where I was living at the time. And there's an assertiveness course. So I went on this course, and then eventually from that was one of those moments that changed my life, because I then found a supportive community of women, not a bereaved community. I mean, there were women who were bereaved within that, but they were all supportive. They were talking.
Yes.
My experiences became normalised, and eventually I had a lot of counselling. I had years of counselling, probably about 12 years altogether. And I think even at the end of that counselling, when I eventually came out of it, I still felt a little bit lost, a little bit like still not 100% sure who I am.
It didn't provide all the answers.
No, no.
But you trained during that period as well.
I did, yeah. I trained as a counsellor. I didn't particularly pursue it because what I felt was that everybody should have access to counselling. And the sort of counselling that I did was person-centred. So I was working with an agency, so it was time limited, but not to 6 sessions, which is ridiculous, which is, what you can get through the NHS at the moment.
Yeah.
So I had a real sort of problem with that. And then I went to work in education, in adult education, working with people with what they used to call severe and enduring mental health problems, so sort of long-term mental illness. And that felt like the next step was community and people being together and sharing experiences. And from that, started to learn about learning, started to learn about the mind and how it worked. And then I think it was 2006, I discovered positive psychology, because psychology was always very negative and it was all about what was wrong with people. And I was sent on an ILM, that's hard to say, Institute of Line Management course at Derby City Council, I had a contract there. And it was run by a guy called Andy Cope, who's now Dr. Andy Cope. And essentially it was the art of being brilliant, which is a fantastic course.
Yes.
And that was another big shift, because it made me realise I had the choice of, the life that I lived was entirely down to me. I could choose to enjoy that life and be the best version of myself I possibly could, or I could choose not to. And so I chose to go for the brilliant option.
Well,
So
you
yeah,
certainly have. You certainly have, because you are brilliant. I think that Andy Cope went into my daughter's school in
yeah,
Derby.
yeah,
I think I recognised that name,
yeah.
and it's so interesting what you're saying about this time that you spent in the education side of things, because groups, the power of groups and the
Oh
power of
yeah,
community. Oh,
yeah.
tell me about that. You just sort of went, oh yeah. What's your feeling and thoughts about community
um,
groups?
yeah, yeah. I mean, with my thinking head on, we need community, we need to belong. But from my life experience, it's, belonging to a group where you feel a part of it. And the feedback we always got we used to run courses for people with long-term mental health conditions. And at the end, the feedback was always, I thought I was on my own, and I realise now that I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's just been an ongoing theme throughout my life. I am quite solitary. I'm a bit of um, what's the opposite to somebody who's really outgoing. I'm not a party animal.
Introvert. You're an
I'm an introvert.
introvert.
I need time on my own to recharge my batteries, but also need to belong. And there are lots of communities that I belong in and I'm involved in. So um, over lockdown, I got involved with lots of different groups, women's groups mainly. And I eventually became a director at a community called Compassionate Voices, which is a women's community based in is it based in Chesterfield?
Oh.
But it was all online when it first got started. So there are lots of us who are scattered further afield. So that's been really important, just to have somewhere where people can go and just be themselves. That's so important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it sounds as if some crucial parts of your life review, as you look over where did you get lost, where did you find yourself
Yeah.
again, was about finding community and also being able to facilitate and sometimes lead community,
Yeah.
which takes you on into the next part. We're going to take a break in a minute, but after the break, I'd like to come back and talk about what you're doing with the Green Party, what you're doing with young people, and I think that we haven't. I would just like to touch on the jewellery making, because it just feels such an essential part of the you that I know. And does that feel as if that's any of the threads that we're talking about in terms of finding yourself?
Yeah, I suppose another thread for me was being creative. And so I started making jewelry. I think I was about 14. And I was a Saturday girl. So it was my boyfriend at the time. His dad used to cut stones and tumble stones, which was very fashionable at the time. So I got a job in the shop that he shared with a jeweler. So over the months and the years, I started having a go at making jewelry, and that was it was something that I'd never tried it before, and it felt like it was something that I could do, and I really enjoyed doing it, and I did it for 20 years or so. I say 20 years or so. I still make jewelry occasionally. I've still got loads of, I've got all the tools and the kit, and yeah, yeah. So yeah, and it's one of those things. I think when you learn how to do something, it's lovely to go back to it and to feel competent, and yeah, yeah,
It's also meditative, isn't it?
yeah,
To work with our hands, and
yeah,
I think in the episode that I did with Ruth about her work as a ceramic artist is something just very sort of connecting with our history, with our ancestors, with
yeah,
the people going back, who've been making jewelry for centuries, and
yeah,
and I think ties into, sometimes I'll watch an archaeological program and just the thrill of, they were doing what you've been doing, a long time ago, and it's buried in the earth, lost in the mists of time. But there's a connection to these grounding meditative activities and the uniqueness, because nothing, you can't really repeat a piece. You can try, but everything that comes out is unique. And I think one of the strengths that I notice with you is this capacity to go with the flow, because you've not had an easy life.
No.
We haven't time to go into that. We're going to skirt over the top of some really wearing and difficult situations that you've been in. But there's something about when you're creating, when you're making, it doesn't matter what your social status is, what your relationship status is, what your income is. You're just in that moment and you're being you. And I found a quote that made me think of you because of the jewelry, I suppose, and you. And it is said that there are three things extremely hard: steel, a diamond, and to know oneself. And as I'm welcoming you to Women of Steel today, I think that knowing yourself is something that you're sharing with us today. So let's go to a break now, and then when we come back, we can talk more about the present and the future.
Experience therapy with Miriam Grace on a Wise Woman retreat in Derbyshire. Designed for your rest and return to self. Sound baths, a campfire evening, group therapy, reflexology and gentle yoga are threaded through a programme of personal quiet time and journaling.
I've never felt so looked after in my entire life, and I count myself so lucky to have been able to experience the retreat.
You will feel safely held through soulful, psychological and therapeutic elements by your experienced, mature and qualified facilitators.
The joy, the warmth, the generosity, your beautiful home. It was a turning point in my life.
With nutritious home-cooked food and your own double bed, retreats run from Thursday evening to Sunday afternoon at a bespoke venue in the Peak District. For more reviews, search Wise Women Derbyshire on Facebook, Instagram or on the web.
I so desperately want to return. It was just a wonderful experience.
Oh, welcome back after the break. I'm talking to Caron Kirkham, and we're looking at life and life's knocks and being lost and community and all sorts of things as we review Caron's life beginning in the 1950s till now, but also as we look at the changes in culture and Caron's passion for listening to young people today and listening to herself and listening to the planet as well. So welcome back, Caron.
Thank you.
Well, what were we saying in the break about, we were talking about going through life when you're lost, and I was saying how important it is to not expect clarity, to not expect that we've got a purpose or we know what we're doing, but to not wait for that. But to just keep living that day and being in that day, and that can sound very trite and easy to say. I think if people assume the backstory as being privileged and easy and so on, and I know that this isn't a therapy session and you don't want to go into all the details, but I think it would be helpful for people to to understand how much of the wonderful things you've done and achieved have been at exactly the same time as a lot of things being very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. So as you were talking, as you was just sort of introducing what we're talking about, my mind went back to one of those early courses at the Women's Centre, and I came across the quote about the longest journey starting with a single step, and that's always stuck with me. So I think one of my mantras, if you like, is just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just, take some action, move forward. And when I talk about being lost, I wasn't just, lost wandering about in a forest somewhere. I was living my life and continually learning. And I was always on a course or more than one course sometimes. And when opportunities presented themselves, I always went for them. But yeah, there were some difficult things, but just keep taking action. And I find now that if I'm not feeling so good, or if I'm feeling a bit low, if I just take an action, whether it's washing the pots or going out for a walk or organising a litter pick, that makes me feel better. And the other thing that I think I've learned, I've been in the process of learning all my life, is that the things that are difficult, if we can do those things, gives us the most pleasure. So it's not always the things we think. I'm 68. I could be sitting out there on a deck chair in my daughter's garden, or I could drive up to the sea and sit on the seafront and have an ice cream. But what I really want to do is what I'm fired up to do, which is, community activism and, thinking about saving the planet. Yeah. So, it's about engaging with, what fires you up, what makes you enthusiastic.
Yeah, engagement. And, we were talking about, because we always say this when we get to age, I go, but you don't even look as if you're in your 60s. And then you say about the filter, because you see me as when you first met me. I would have been in my 20s, because we met on some of these courses at Derby Women's Centre. And you say it's a filter, but I do think it's engagement in life that keeps us young and keeps us learning. And this learning, we now know the neuroscience of that as well, is that the brain's plastic, and you're growing new neural networks all the time by I think it's solving puzzles is seen to really help the brain, and you're trying to solve some quite big puzzles there. So tell me, what's the name of your role? You are actually a counsellor now?
No.
You're running for that.
Yes. Just a local counsellor.
Local counsellor. Yeah.
So my title at the moment with the Green Party is lead candidate for the area that I live in. So it's not just me. There's a team, talk about new learning. Yeah, there's quite a bit to be done. It's a combination, really. So I only moved up here 2018. Because my daughter moved up here. It's a bit of a long story, but she went to uni in Newcastle, went back to Nottingham, did a PhD, and came back up to Newcastle for a union and met the guy who's now her husband. So she ended up living up here. So I'd been around for my younger daughter, who's in Derby, when she had her children. So I wanted to be up here for Charlotte when she had her son. So I moved up, and so I left all those amazing networks that I got in Derby. I knew everybody in Derby. It was a bit of a joke with my kids that I couldn't walk through town without meeting at least 5 people that I knew. And I've had to sort of come up here and start to learn about the networks up here and make new friends and find new activities. I can't remember the point of what I'm saying, but it's just all about new stuff. And then I've got to learn about politics as well.
Yes, yeah.
That might be quite useful. I mean, what I'm doing at the moment is really about just listening to people, and that's what our current campaign is about. It's just about, what do you want? What do you need? What's good here, and what needs, some help or some support. So I feel quite comfortable with that. I've had to learn to go and knock on people's doors and ask them questions, which is fine. I've had some good teachers, and again, for me, it's about doing something that I believe in, because the Green Party values line up with my values as a climate activist, in that they recognise the cause of the destruction of our planet, and the systems that are harming our planet. They're all about social justice, which is another element of climate destruction, and they're all about community and that belonging and looking after each other. So yeah, it's an easy thing to do. It's something I feel a lot of passion about.
But that's very not everybody could do that, Caron. Just up and leave, and something that it doesn't really seem to register a lot with you, but is the fact that financial security has not been part of your life ever. And when you talk about Charlotte getting her PhD and so on, she's had a very different life to what you would have been supported to do. Because you started work. Well, you started part-time work at 15, didn't you? And, and you've been trying to make ends meet ever since.
Yeah.
What's how do you take these big steps without having that that privilege behind you?
Interesting. Yeah. I've always lived sort of hand to mouth. I've spent a lot of time either being the sole breadwinner or being a single parent, and I don't know, I think maybe when you've experienced that, I was working for Derbyshire Mind when I decided to move, and just before I made that decision, they booked us an appointment with a financial advisor, and I told them that I was thinking about moving, and they said, "Have you got a mortgage?" And I said, "No, I haven't got a house. I live in a rented house." And they said, "Oh, well, that's great then. That's a real advantage." And it's that positive psychology stuff about seeing the freedom in that, and also when you've never had anything and you're not, I don't think you're scared. You're as scared as if you have had that financial.
Yes, yeah. I think that is really interesting, because you haven't got as much to lose, and I'm thinking that there are times when I've had to make decisions to have less money, like when I decided to home educate one of my children for a year, and there was it was helpful that I was going to lose part of my income, but my income wasn't that big anyway, and I'm thinking about a lot of the women that I work with that have comfort in their financial side of their lives because of their marriages, but they're marriages that they don't want to be in, and it's really hard for them to get out of that situation, because there will be a financial difference, and they will have to lose more than just an unsatisfactory relationship.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm thinking about, when I talked about being in therapy, when I was in therapy for all those years, I was paying for it, but I I truly believed that it was better to do that and do whatever I needed to do to be me and to be myself. I just felt like it was worth the investment. So I never sort of hesitated with that.
Would you do it again?
Maybe not for quite as long, but I didn't know, I didn't know that there were other things, and so I made the choice, I made the decision based on the circumstances at the time.
Yes, I know, and I'm springing these questions on you without you having a chance
It
to
was
think.
worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it, even though when I left therapy, I didn't feel like, oh, I'm here, I've done it all. But it gave me a really good grounding.
Yeah, well, I've had years of therapy, and I suppose that was part of, why I asked that, because I think that I do think that community and groups and so on have a really similar impact.
Yeah.
But, maybe it was having a therapist who would receive me unconditionally, who would listen to me, that helped me develop the sort of, it's almost like the pathways so that I can receive and make the most of community. Maybe I would have been in a community but felt so different and such an outsider that I wouldn't have been able to feel comfortable there. So maybe it's all necessary in this way. And I think that was another point that you and I were saying we wanted to make is that you didn't have all this mapped out. You didn't think when you were 30, well, I'm going to do this and this, and then I'm going to end up living near the sea and saving the planet and listening to young people. A lot of your life just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as I said, I always took opportunities when they presented themselves. And there's an element of, it's partly hope and partly faith, which I think grew more and more. The more work I did on myself, the more I trusted myself, and I trusted the universe. I remember having conversations with you years ago about the universe providing, and when I did decide to make the move to Newcastle, I didn't have anywhere to live and I didn't have a job, and I did a visualization, and I wrote it all down and promptly forgot about it, as I do, and some months later, when I moved into my new flat, I found it again, and it had completely, it's exactly as I'd written it. I got exactly what I'd visualized.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's those sorts of experiences as well sort of help with the feel the fear and do it anyway sort of approach.
And the feel the fear and do it anyway. I mean, what is this madness, Caron? Tell me about the cycling and how that ties into your personality, your approach to life.
So it's how far do I go back with the story, really. Basically, I'm getting older and stiff, and I walk a lot, and I've walked a lot for a number of years now. And my friend is a sports physiotherapist, and I went to her and I said, my knee's really paining me. What can I do about it? And she said, if I referred you to the best sort of specialist, they would tell you to get a bike and ride a bike. And I've got a bike, but I've not ridden it since COVID. And then there's a charity that I support called Lend with Care, which is part of Care International. And they wrote me an email and said, do you fancy an adventure? And I looked at it and I thought, can't do that, I'm too old. And I went off to my walking group and I was telling somebody about it, and she's probably 10 years older than me. She said, "You're not too old." She said, "I think you should do it. I'll sponsor you," she said. And I thought about it. And when I went to India, there was a woman there who was in her 70s. And not only was she in her 70s, she couldn't ride a bike when she signed up for it. And I thought, I'm not too old.
No.
That's just a story I'm telling myself.
Yes, yes.
And I mulled it over for a couple of weeks and then said, right, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and when I did it, the euphoria was amazing, because it's something about having a massive goal, but knowing that it's going to be really hard, but I know that I can do it because I've got the mindset to do it.
Yes.
And whatever my body needs to do, I'll sort that out as I go along. Yeah.
And
So
I
I'm
was
really,
and I was only joking that you're mad. I think I could rephrase that as you're countercultural. You've said to me many a time, I'm doing this because I'm listening to myself. And despite being very, very busy, I know that when you and I talk about the main thing, and this is from a Stephen Covey quote, which is, the main thing is to keep the main thing, that your main thing is your health.
yeah. So again, thinking back to all the therapy, I've spent years looking after my mental health and, learning about it and doing things that support my mental health. And I think I was probably about 30 when I realised I was a couch potato, and started doing some exercise and thinking a bit more about my physical health. But I've never put as much energy into it as I have done for my mental health. So yeah, consequently, when I started doing some work with you on the Nourish and Nurture, and you introduced us to this quote, my thought was, it's health. It's about being as healthy as I can be. I do feel incredibly lucky to still be alive, and losing my dad and my granddad so early, it's like I've always appreciated the life that I've got, and I just want to be as fit as I can so I can still, hang out with my grandkids and and not be a burden to people, and do exciting things. So yeah.
I think, this is a life well lived, and you're still living it. And I don't want to use a cliche, but that I really think it's important that anybody listening knows that they are not too old to live their life and to live in this moment. And thank you so much for giving us some detail on what it's like to live in that way, to one step at a time, one foot in front of another, taking opportunities where you see them. Is there anything that you'd like to add as a message to our listeners today?
I feel like I should say something profound, but just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Yeah, just keep taking action. Find an action that makes you feel better, and just keep moving and have faith. Yeah.
Thank you, Caron. It's been lovely to talk to you.
And it's been lovely to talk to you.
The quote from the show is attributed to Benjamin Franklin. There are 3 things extremely hard: steel, a diamond, and to know oneself. Caron's details about her different work are in our show notes, and you can even support her by sponsoring her on her bike ride taking place in the autumn of 2025. Without the concept of needing a purpose in life, or there being a path to fulfillment, Caron has taken a circuitous, hard, meandering and fascinating journey through her life to arrive at a place where she feels no longer lost and in alignment with her own unique purpose. While you may not have a purpose or a direction, Caron asks us to take one step, one action today. What action will you take? And how will you make the main thing in your life? Thank you for listening to Women of Steel, created and hosted by me, Miriam Grace, psychotherapist at Blue Skies. If you'd like to know more about my work as a therapist and writer, you can follow me on social media. Please take a look at the show notes for information and contact details. And in the meantime, be kind to yourself.